A man released from prison embarks on a brutal 10-day killing spree, claiming he was acting on orders from an ancient Egyptian serpent god. The justice system's failures allowed this tragedy to unfold, leaving a community in terror and disbelief. How did Nikko Jenkins, a man with a history of violence and mental health issues, manage to commit such heinous acts so soon after his release? Nikko Jenkins, who committed 4 murders during a 10-day spree in Omaha in 2013, has recently taken a surprising legal step. After being sentenced to death in 2017, Jenkins has now filed a handwritten motion requesting the court to expedite his execution, stating, "I no longer desire to appeal the death sentence imposed upon me." This development has raised questions about Jenkins' mental health, as his court-appointed attorney expressed surprise at the motion, attributing it to Jenkins' ongoing inconsistent behavior due to mental illness. Diving into this chilling case of Nikko Jenkins, 2013, raises unsettling questions about the intersection of mental illness, criminal justice, and public safety.
But I want you to understand something, and I'm going to say this very clearly. I was not there. Only thing I was hearsay, not hearsay, but a true say, like, okay.
Nikko Jenkins was born in Omaha, Nebraska to parents David and Lori. As you can tell by taking one look at him, he didn't exactly have the greatest upbringing in the world. His family was actually well known to police as being hellraisers going back generations. It is a family that has deteriorated over time through escalating violent crime, drug and alcohol abuse, and child neglect. Authorities have removed at least 20 children from various related family homes. In fact, various family members have been involved in at least 150 other cases during the time of Nikko Jenkins that ended in either acquittals, mistrials, or dropped charges, and have been convicted of a whopping 633 crimes since 1979. Nikko actually first entered the justice system at age 7 after he brought a handgun to school. Thankfully, he didn't shoot anyone. At 11 years old, he was removed from the group home he was placed in after repeatedly beating the living shit out of everybody. He did grow up watching his parents' fights all the time, so violence probably came pretty naturally to him. Yeah, it will, definitely. And at age 13, he continued his love of violence, but then it escalated to stabby. And in 2003, at age 17, he was finally sent to prison for 2 armed carjackings. While serving a prison sentence for the 2 carjackings, in 2009, Nikko was convicted and faced up to 5 more years in prison for assaulting a prison guard during a furlough for his grandmother's funeral. In 2011, a county district judge sentenced Nikko to 2 to 4 years in prison, a term that is cut to 1 to 2 years under state sentencing guidelines. However, the judge ordered the terms to be served concurrently with his already sentenced prison time, when it should have been tacked on at the end. So, Nikko Jenkins was out of prison early in 2013. With his criminal record and convictions, he should be seen as a danger to society and given time to repent truly. But the justice system assumed he was ready for release, leading to a serious mistake. In July 2013, 26-year-old Nikko Jenkins would finally step out of prison after having served more than 10 years. It was also during that time in prison and in isolation, he decided to tattoo and scarp his face, deciding that would be his look. He clearly based his look off a serial killer, probably Victor Zsasz from Batman. Or maybe a snake. One thing's for sure, he's a pretty murderous-looking murderer. Then, less than 2 weeks later.
The white F-150. We got 2 parties inside the vehicle. Appear to be shot in the head. And can you send a squad to our location?
Juan Uribe Peña and Jorge Caiga Ruiz were found shot to death in their car in Omaha, their pockets turned inside out. There was no reason for Nikko Jenkins to kill them. He didn't know who they were. He just thought it would be a good idea. It wasn't. 8 days later, at around 7 a.m., the body of Curtis Bradford was found. He had been shot twice in the back. It was later revealed that Curtis and Nikko had posed for a Facebook photo the day before. Out of all of Nikko's victims, Curtis Bradford was the only one he knew they had met in prison, though judging by the amount of time he spent in prison and his family upbringing, others suggest he was attempting to fulfill what he claimed were orders from a deity. Nikko's fourth and final victim was Andrea Kruger. Her body was discovered on August 21st at about 2:15 a.m. by a deputy sheriff responding to a shots-fired call. Her body was found lying in the road with multiple bullet wounds. She had been returning home after a bartending shift. That evening, Andrea's SUV was found abandoned 12 miles away. Police later revealed they believed the SUV had been abandoned about 2.5 hours after being stolen, and that a feeble attempt had been made at setting the vehicle's interior on fire.
We have an active investigation. We want to maintain the integrity of that investigation.
Douglas County Chief Deputy Tom Wheeler says the public played a crucial role after Andrea Kruger's death. Tips led investigators from the murder scene near 168th and Fort to her SUV near 43rd and Charles.
And so Nikko became one of those, serial killers, or rather a spree killer, actually. Not that it's a competition. Nikko Jenkins was arrested on August 30th after a woman and ex-girlfriend of Nikko said that she saw one of Nikko's cousins give Nikko a gun, and he had also threatened to kill her family, so a threat that he would/could follow through on, if he wasn't arrested, of course.
Officials won't say what they took from this Tudor Heights apartment Thursday night, but sources say evidence recovered may be connected to several unsolved homicides. This apartment near 108th and Maple is where police arrested 26-year-old Nikko Jenkins Thursday for an outstanding felony warrant for terroristic threats. Sources say Jenkins' ex-girlfriend called police saying he threatened to kill her and her family. And the woman reports Jenkins told her he was going to send demonic forces to her mother's house. But sources say that's just the tip of the iceberg.
And while the police had him in custody, more evidence against Nikko began to mount up, and the police, they actually gathered surveillance footage of a woman close to Nikko buying ammunition, distinctive ammunition that was used in the murders. Nikko Jenkins, age 26, arrested today on 4 counts of first-degree murder, the Kruger homicide and the murder 2 days earlier of 22-year-old Curtis Bradford. A week earlier, 2 more killings linked to Jenkins. Jorge Cajia Ruiz and Juan Uribe Peña shot to death in a pickup near Spring Lake Park. Investigators today say Nikko Jenkins was an indiscriminate killer. Some victims he knew, others he did not. And on September 3, 2013, Nikko Jenkins confessed to the 4 murders.
There you go. I like to be alone. I need to speak to someone. Okay. Because that's what makes my mind frame goes back. I'm schizophrenic, bipolar, sir. I don't take medication. So right now, that's why I'm trying to stay. That's why I told them they need to hurry up when I'm in this mind frame. Okay. So that when I speak to you, it's clear. And but another thing, what I'm about to do, the sheriff office and you guys need to be honest with me. Okay. Because if we're going to make this work and get this closure for this family, you're going to have to tell me what you have and what you don't have. That way I know if I have to go get it for you. After.
You alright?
You alright, man? You alright, man? That's what I don't understand, man. He said, all I was going to grasp my precious, man. All I wanted was help from the people, man. I will testify to that. This is the first time that I've ever aided and assisted law enforcement in my life. So any jury, any judge, any prosecutor will be, once I sit on that stand and testify to this, it's golden. Any jury is not going to look at me and say, oh, he's told before and he's done. With my history and my reputation, And this is first-time testimony I've ever aided system enforcement, and everything that I'm saying is accurate.
You gotta come to terms.
I understand.
Because here, listen to me.
But
But listen, no, listen. I've listened to you for a long time. It's time for you to listen to me. Because like what you said, if you don't tell me what the heck happened out there, people are going to think the absolute worst. People are going to think the absolute worst. If this is a robbery went bad, if there's someone that did something really stupid, now's the time. Because otherwise, you're right. They're going to look at Nikko Jenkins as a flat, bloody killer. That's what's going to happen. You not realize I got Nikko Jenkins? You don't realize that? I got Nikko Jenkins. I got you.
What do you mean you got me?
I got your DNA at the murder scene. I got your DNA in the car.
Sir.
I got the weapon. I got Nikko Jenkins. I don't need to make... I don't care about it. I just want other people that are involved in it. What the hell happened out there? And why? I already... I know who. I know what. I know when. I know where. And then when I talked to you earlier, you were saying stuff about a carjacking.
That woman's husband and children, that woman's husband is grieving right now. This is not just some psycho killer that just wanted to go trophy. I'm documented psychiatrically disordered. I'm documented chemically imbalanced. This is a fact. So my point is,
We're well aware of that.
my point is this though. This family didn't deserve this.
Right.
This could have been prevented had it not been for the Nebraska Department of Corrections doing what they knew what they supposed to have did. And they never gave me an opportunity. They never gave me an opportunity for treatment because I wouldn't take the medicine.
Mr. Nikko Jenkins was an indiscriminate killer who wreaked havoc on the Omaha area since being released from prison on July 30th. He crossed racial, gender, and city boundaries to commit his murders. It is rare to have a killer cross racial and gender lines, so law enforcement knew we had an exceptionally violent offender.
He was charged with 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of being a felon in possession, and 4 counts of use of a firearm. He already faced charges for terroristic threats when he threatened a woman's family. They also arrested the man who gave Nikko the weapon he used in his killings. In November of that year, Nikko had been in jail about 2 months. At this time, he decided to write a letter to the Omaha World Herald. In the letter, he asked the paper to help him and the families of his victims, and he writes that he will plead guilty to all charges. He writes that he wished to get the help he so clearly needs, psychiatric treatment, as the health department had full knowledge of Apophis and the demonic forces at work. Yes, this is real life. In February 2014, Nikko filed a federal lawsuit seeking $24.5 million from the state of Nebraska for wrongfully releasing him from prison and not giving him mental health treatment. He also blamed corrections officials for the 4 murders he committed. That's not going to go over well.
Portray Nikko Jenkins as a cold-blooded killer, but his wife says he never got the help he needed.
And his psych evaluation shows he needed mental help as early as the 2nd grade. That's when he says a voice told him to bring his mom's gun to school. A voice Nikko now says is an Egyptian demon forcing him to kill.
He's not pretending to be crazy. He's real life crazy. That Apophis gives him orders.
Nikko told her Apophis saved him from attempting suicide in solitary confinement a few years ago.
It was this voice that came and was just like, if you do what I tell you to do, if you follow my demands, then I'll make sure you're safe and make sure you're okay.
Now, at this point you're probably thinking, judging by his upbringing, the time he spent in prison, his crimes, the interrogation footage, the letters, Mother of God, this poor man, he never got the help he so clearly needed. The system failed him. He never got any treatment for the issues he so clearly has. This was a complete failure of the health system.
Rob and Brandy, we've heard it before. An Egyptian god speaks to Nikko Jenkins, but a psychiatrist in court today says he thinks Jenkins is faking it, while another doctor from Douglas County Corrections testified of all the people he's evaluated, Jenkins is by far the most dangerous.
You wouldn't want to mess with Nikko and be on his bad list, I'll tell you right now.
After the judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation of Nikko Jenkins, the psychiatrist concluded that he had antisocial personality disorder and was likely faking psychotic symptoms, and that he was making up the voices he heard as a way to justify his actions, essentially finding that he's a sociopath who would not be amenable to treatment. His defense's doctor says he's schizophrenic, while Lincoln Regional Center doctors say he's got a personality disorder, but he isn't clinically insane. Jenkins says he heard the voice of an Egyptian god while carrying out the murders. The 31-page report entered into district court details dozens of evaluations of Jenkins at the Lincoln Correctional Center and his history from a child through adulthood. Clinical psychologist Kurt Newring with Forensic Behavioral Health reviewed the report and says there's a pattern of antisocial behavior.
That's not part of the is he competent or is he not, but it resonates pretty clearly in the evaluation that this is a man that has, over his lifetime, manipulated others, deceived others, abused others, and has taken satisfaction in doing that. It seemed, based on the report provided, that these symptoms came up when he needed them and disappeared when he didn't.
That's not good. After being declared competent to stand trial, the court case began. On his request, Nikko was allowed to represent himself. Throughout the trial, he maintained that he acted under the command of Apophis, and still did. And he put on quite a show for the court, including speaking in tongues, howling and laughing as prosecutors recounted the details of his victims' deaths. On April 16, 2014, the judge found Nikko Jenkins guilty of all 4 murders.
Soviet resurrection. Russia, get Kevin.
Now, during Nikko's time in prison while awaiting trial, he decided to pass the time by making some body modifications.
The Department of Corrections under fire again. An injury behind bars is raising questions.
Family members and state senators want to know why officials can't put a stop to it. One inmate involved in nearly a dozen incidents behind bars. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Griswold.
And I'm Craig DeGrelli. Convicted killer Nikko Jenkins injured himself yet again. Now prominent state senators are asking, how does this keep happening and where's the supervision?
For example, in 2015, he had the superb idea to carve 666 onto his forehead, or rather he tried to. The carving he made on his face was backwards, funnily enough, because he did it looking into a mirror. So now it just looks like a bunch of upside down 9s. He also decided to carve the word Satan on his face and cut his tongue so it would be like a snake's, and suffered 9 lacerations when he did so. He then smeared blood all over the walls of his cells. He would constantly cut and mutilate himself because he just loved and got off on the reactions of fellow inmates. But when the other inmates wouldn't react and wouldn't call for medical aid because they presumably were just used to it, that's just Nikko doing Nikko things, then he would start to panic and be like, oh, I need help. He sounds just like a child. He did all this with razor blades. No one knows how he got them. Someone was obviously slipping them to him. He would also do things like drink his own pee-pee and snort his own jizz. And, oh boy, he took an action that many would consider drastic. Warning. He attempted to cut his penis with a razor into the shape of a serpent, and did enough damage to require 27 stitches. Jenkins has since mutilated his face, tongue, and penis, and attempted to hang himself at least twice. He also swallowed a set of keys. But here's the question out of genuine mental illness. Or was it all part of a calculated act to avoid the death penalty? Prosecutors have said Nikko told prison employees that he self-mutilates so he can use the insanity defense and embarrass the administration. Life or death will be up to the 3-judge panel in the case against convicted spree killer Nikko Jenkins. This morning, attorneys argue if Jenkins' IQ was high enough for him to even have a death penalty hearing. A test when he was first incarcerated in 2003 suggests his IQ was 69, which is under the threshold. Jenkins himself objected to his own attorney's questioning and wanted to get right to the three-judge panel.
I want to expose these temporal physical evidence and this perjury that these officers committed before I was ever charged.
Judge Peter Battalion orders that the hearing move forward, and Jenkins is competent. Jenkins tells me he pleaded no contest because he wanted to keep his family from being implicated in the murders, but now says that he was set up. He will testify in the death penalty hearing and says he wants to expose the corruption.
The internal affairs investigation on Douglas County Sheriff's and Omaha Police Department have been filed, and those law enforcement agencies need to file those investigations to those temporal physical evidence of the law enforcement officers.
In May 2017, 3 years after he was found guilty, the delay was essentially the multiple psychiatric evaluations he had. Nikko Jenkins was sentenced to death by a three-judge panel. He was also sentenced to 450 years in prison on weapons charges connected with the murders.
Defendant's commission of these 4 murders over a 10-day period is one of the worst killing sprees in the history of this state. Each one of these murders was a deliberate and planned act. The victims were pre-selected and the murders were purposeful. Therefore, this panel finds that the death penalty is appropriate, should be, and is hereby given for each of the 4 murders by the defendant. It is therefore the sentence of this court as follows. At case CR 13-2768, count 1, murder in the first degree, a class 1 felony, death. Count 2, use of a deadly weapon, firearm to commit a felony, a class 1C felony, 45 to 50 years to run consecutive to all murder convictions at counts 1, 4, 7, and 10. Count 3, possession of a deadly weapon by a prohibited person, class 1D felony, 45 to 50 years to run consecutive to all murder convictions at counts 1, 4, 7, and 10, and count 2.
In 2018, Nikko attempted suicide in prison by slashing his own throat, and he did so again in 2019 by pulling tiles off the wall and sharpening them, and reportedly did some damage to his eyes and neck. The attorney said that Nikko's attempts on his own life must be in the double digits by now. Now, this case is as insane as Nikko Jenkins is. However, multiple psychiatrists, after they evaluated him, said he was saying he knew what he was doing, yet he would be like, no, I'm an Egyptian snake art, told me to kill people, I need treatment. However, there are conflicting reports, and some psychiatrists did find that he had schizophrenia. Among the documents WOWT6 News obtained is a psychiatric diagnosis re-evaluation of Jenkins. It explains a number of things about Jenkins' current thinking, that Jenkins no longer admits to killing 4 people in a 10-day span back in 2013, that he believes he'll eventually be let out of prison and move to Cuba, where he'll make nuclear weapons at the direction of evil demons that continue to speak to him, and that he needs to be killed so he can be resurrected. All of those things and many more outlined led to this conclusion from Dr. Bruce Gutnick, quote, Mr. Jenkins is not now competent to stand trial, but when they prescribed him medication for this, he would, every time would that fail, refuse to take the medication. Honestly though, regardless of his mental states, he never really had a chance. He had a shitty upbringing surrounded by shitty people. And he did start taking medication finally in 2018, and apparently his mental states improved. Though a year later he did stand try and claw his own eyes out. And he clearly has some deep-seated mental, serious psychotic issues. Well, most recently, this year in 2019, the court rejected the notion that he had any mental illness, and if you're mentally ill, you can't get the death penalty. Either he is seriously mentally ill, or it's the defense trying to prove it. But the courts, they're not having any of it. However, this case was clearly brought about by a sick mind, a system that failed somewhere along the road, and it ended up with 4 people losing their lives. It's disturbing, tragic, and everything in between.